Sure, let's go. Um, we can kick it off quickly. Like we've been observing each other for the last years, and uh, from my perspective, in the last 6 months or so, so many people came and said like, "Hey, we're using Port and we're so happy." And can you do more stuff with them? And really, fantastic, great cases. I'm not sure we have clearance to name any names, but large enterprises, and really, really great brands. And they all said like they love Port's way of sort of the interface and the structure and the ease of use. And it's also something I was always, I always loved. I always loved the, you have this demo on the website, the Port demo, which I always
Yeah.
thought is a fantastic idea. And so, yeah, that was when we said, okay, well, why don't we, if so many people are using these things in combination, can we do that a little more systematic? You guys build an integration that's fantastic. Put that out on your docs page, and we're seeing more users there. And so, okay, this is like becoming like a relevant pattern. And so we thought, yeah, so Jeremy also liking the Port on the website. Yeah, you really did a great job there. And so we thought, okay, well, that's definitely like a reason to build one of these reference architectures, and then also more demos, and show the world how to use these systems in combination to build internal developer platforms. And that's the reason why we're here, I suppose. Or am I missing anything before we dive in?
No, I think you're totally on the spot. So yeah, obviously from our side, we really like to give the users the correct tools and make it very convenient for them. And seeing the Humanitec platform and the platform orchestrator, it makes a lot of sense to connect those two tools together and sort of tie the whole loop in as sort of one solution that users can take advantage of and can really simplify their flows and also really improve the developer experience and sort of push them forward on their platform engineering journey. So I think it makes total sense, and it can really easily and really intuitively plug in to their existing flows, their existing logic, and sort of be a very organic tool in their build, in their kit. I think that's also something that we'll show today, how it all fits together very nicely and gives a very clean, very simple user experience and developer experience that makes developers' lives a lot easier, and also for the platform teams and the DevOps teams, it really saves them time, gives developers more autonomy and more self-service, and sort of it's a win-win for everyone.
Absolutely. And I think it's so important that I think, you guys, we see ourselves as essentially just people supplying building blocks, but you're building the platform out there. So what we're showing you here are essentially like blueprints and inspirations, maybe how other people do stuff. And that's, the chance for you to take this away and see how this fits into your world. We've chosen a couple, like in this demo, we've chosen a couple technologies that we are grouping and pairing, and bringing into all of this. But you can swap them out. Like if you're using GitLab and you're not using GitHub Actions, that's absolutely perfectly fine, right? We just want to give you an inspiration, and then you can take it from here. So if we're looking here at the reference architecture, which we just exactly, and I think Raj, you're also also already starting asking questions around this. So we can give an overview about the architectural design here. And then I would say we give more the stage to, do a demo of the end-to-end flow, really go into a little bit of detail. Then afterwards, we can maybe dissect what happened a little bit. And then, questions, and, feel free to ask questions if it fits into the flow. We'll weave it in. Otherwise, we will do that in the Q&A section. So if we look at the reference architecture here, we are following the McKinsey design here. Always do this, just keeps our cognitive load low because the design is always the same. On the top, we have the essentially developer control plane. That's the interaction, interaction with the interfaces with the platform. We obviously have Port on top as the UI. and the automation engine and all of these things. And so really the sort of the primary interface and action method with the platform. The platform is the sum of all of the different tools. GitHub is just as much a part of this. So in GitHub, you have in this case, a differentiation between platform source code. In Raj, to your question, that would contain your Terraform conventions, for instance. And yes, provisioning infra is part of the internal developer platform that can be essentially, triggered from the UI, absolutely. But there are still other systems that are working with this under the hood. You have the application source code, that is the environment agnostic elements of the configuration for those developers that want to, interact with some of the elements of the platform as code. We have score here. And I think we will show that as well. So this is helping developers do essentially like a code-based abstraction that helps developers articulate what they need. I need a workload and resources. Then we have what we call the backend of the platform, integration delivery plane, your CI pipeline to build and push to the registry. We have the registry. We have an orchestration for the backend. The orchestrator is essentially reading in the request from the developer, the Terraform conventions, if we stick with the Terraform examples, or cross-plane conventions or whatever, generates the app and infrastructure configurations and in a cyclic resource graph, executes this and updates the resource plane. We can explain how that procedure works after the demo. And this is interwoven with a monitoring and logging plane, with a security plane, secrets management injection, maybe policy checking, if that's something that you are concerned with as well, which is often the case at enterprise scale. Yeah, so that's essentially here the design. I like to think about platform architecture like software architecture. You have logic handling components. You need to manage the life cycle. You need to have all of these things in sync. And with that, I'm very much looking forward to your demo where you will show us a couple of flows in that system. And actually, all of what you're seeing here today is reality, is in use with customers, and is in use here with the demo. So the stage is yours. Looking forward to the demo.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. So yeah, we're gonna touch about a lot of those things. So we're going to see exactly, for example, the question that Raj asked, how can we provision things that are more infrastructure as code or Terraform and things like that. So we're gonna have an example exactly of that. So what I first want to do is wanted to sort of explain the setup that we have. So first of all, we have Port as our UI, as our software catalog. This here is my Port. It's a very, very simple setup. We have here a catalog with our GitHub integration, which gives us our services, basically our repositories, and also all of our pull requests. Now, those will be important in just a few minutes when I show you the developer flow and the developer experience that he's getting. But before we start looking at that, I also want to take a look at the Humanitec side of things. So in Humanitec, I already have some applications and will also deploy another application as part of the demo. But this here is my Humanitec environment, and I already have here my EKS cluster deployed on Amazon. And I also have a few resource definitions, a few of which we'll also use as part of this demo to sort of show the capabilities of deploying an application and managing its lifecycle and making changes and adding resources with things such as the score YAML file and the score spec. So these are all things we're going to touch on. And aside from that, I want to show here a basic score file, which we're going to use as the reference or as the spec for the application that we're going to deploy. And also, I'm going to touch in a few minutes a bit about GitHub workflows and how they help us achieve this example and how it ties a lot of the pieces together and sort of abstracts away a lot of the complexity in a very concise and reproducible way. So to start off, let's put on our developer hats and say, I got a task to develop a new microservice. We're looking to implement some new features, new functionality in our product, and our starting point is a new microservice. So me as a developer, I'm going to go to the self-service hub in Port. I have here a self-service action to scaffold a new service. Now, in this case, it's a very simple action, just requesting the service name. So let's go ahead and input my cool service. And obviously in here, we're going to work with one specific example, but obviously a lot of companies have a very diverse tech stack. They're using multiple languages and multiple architectures. So it's completely possible to create a more dynamic form that asks you what's the platform and what's the language and all sorts of different requirements and bits and pieces that you can fill in. Obviously, our recommendation is to keep the form as simple as you can because you want to create that good developer experience. You want to reduce the load on the developer and make it very simple for him. Oftentimes, the developer doesn't know too much about what's going on in the backend and in the cloud environment. So you want to sort of abstract it away and give him a nice, clean experience that's very easy for him to use and also keeps him very effective. So we triggered our action that actually started scaffolding a new service. And in Port, we can already see that this action has completed. But to give you an idea of what happened, in the background, this action triggered a GitHub workflow. We can also click on this button here to actually see the new service that was created. So basically, we created a new repository. And also this repository will already appear in our software catalog in Port. So every developer in my company or every developer that has permissions to view the different services in different repositories will already see it in the catalog. But one specific thing about this base template that we started creating this repository from is that it comes pre-packaged with some specific GitHub workflows. And one GitHub workflow that we're using is one called deploy.yaml. And what that does is it is actually responsible to immediately start deploying this new service to a development environment using Humanitec. So what you'll see here in the GitHub Actions view is that as soon as this new repository was created, it already started working on building and notifying Humanitec about this new service. So we created an app, we created a matching criteria to specify which cluster this is going to, and then we actually deployed the app using Score. What this means for the developer is that not only did he get a new repository, which is his starting point to develop his new feature, but he also already got an environment where he can see how his service looks when it's running live. So if I switch over to Humanitec and I take a look at the applications view, I can already see that my cool service is deployed and I can already see that it's running in the development environment. And I can obviously dive in and see, okay, this service is already healthy and it's actually already deployed. So I can click and just get directly into the service. And obviously, this is a small example. And in real life use cases, you would have something a bit more specific to your use case and to your architecture, and something that's more of a starting point to develop a new microservice. In this case, we just want to show a nice, cute example of how you go very quickly from requesting a new service to having something that's already running in the development environment, and you can start making changes to. And obviously, a lot of the power that comes from the Humanitec platform in this case is seeing exactly all the different resources that this service is using. So for example, the cluster where it is deployed, its namespace, login information, and the deployment pipeline that's used for it, and so on. So all of this is already contained here, and that's a plethora of information that usually developers don't know where to find it, or they will have to look in many different places. And in this case, it's all right here. It's all contained in these two very clean and very clear portals of both Port and Humanitec. So this is the first starting point. We got very quickly from not having a service at all to having a great starting point to develop our service and start making code changes. Now, let's take this a step further. For us, it is very common in our microservices to need some additional resources from the cloud. We need a bucket to store data. We need a database. We need a cache and all sorts of different tools or resources that are sort of tightly coupled and integrated with our microservice as it's run. So in this instance, I need to add an S3 bucket to my microservice because it's something that I'm going to use as part of the development. So I'm going back to Port and I take a look at the self-service hub. And again, I have here a self-service action to add an S3 bucket to a service. Now, obviously, this example is specific to S3, but both Port and Humanitec can support a lot of resources, so they can support DNS records and S3 buckets and Redis DBs and MySQL and Postgres, and basically anything you can think of, you can pretty much add it, and you can decide to split it into multiple different actions that will be executed one after another. You can do it as one big job, or you can make it sort of a dynamic form where you change this to, instead of add S3 bucket, add a new resource to service, and then you can select if you want a database or if you want a bucket and so on. So in this case, we're going with the S3 example. So again, very simple form. I just need to select my service. So in this case, we just create the my cool service. Let's go ahead and execute that. And again, it's the same story. In the background, we're triggering a GitHub workflow, and that GitHub workflow will actually go ahead and open a pull request for us. And in just a minute, once that's complete, we'll take a look at how that pull request looks and actually what did it do and why that is important for us. So as you can see, this is already running, and I can even click here to go directly to the job link and see exactly what's happening in the background. And you can see that this is actually opening a pull request that updates our score.yaml file. So now if I go to the pull requests tab, I see, hey, I have a new pull request here. And if I take a look at the changes, it is extremely minimal and very efficient. Why? Because we have score and we can leverage that. So you can see that the only meaningful change that we did here was adding a new storage resource to our score definition, and we specified that it's of type S3. Now, on top of that, we also have another GitHub workflow that listens to new pull request events and starts scaffolding a new version from that pull request. So again, we're taking that new code that we've created and we're letting the Humanitec platform know, hey, there's a new version. We want to deploy that as a separate deployment and let the developer see what's the result of the changes that he made, and also give him any resource that he might require in his work. So in this case, this workflow already started working on this process and already started making the updates. And another nice thing about this workflow is that it's also going to actually update the pull request with more content. So as this is running in the background, it's actually starting to calculate the differences. And obviously the Humanitec platform takes care of a lot of that. It's taking a look at the dependency graph and what new resources are required and how they change from the original version and so on. And you can see that we just got a new comment. So we can see here the diff between the deployments and the active resource usage, the resource graph, and we can even go ahead and view it directly in Humanitec. And this will actually show us exactly how this new deployment and new environment from our pull request is different from the original that we previously had. So that can really help us out in understanding the differences. And it can also help reviewers understand, hey, this pull request adds a lot of code, it adds a lot of resources. How exactly does this look in a more visual manner, and something that's much easier to digest and understand the differences, to see or sort of have a sanity check. Hey, yes, this is running, but also it's doing what I expect it to do. It's using the resources that I sort of understand the requirements and so on. And on top of that, since again, this is another deployment of the service that we already know is running, and we already know that it's getting a DNS record. So I can already go in here and take a look at this new pull request. And again, I have another new environment. Obviously, with real code, you'll see some real changes here. You'll probably see some sort of API spec, and you'll probably see some documentation and you'll be able to interact with it internally or connect it to your other microservices. But in this instance, it's a very simple example of we had an original service, then we made a new change, we added a new resource, we added a cloud resource to top it all off, and now we have the new version of the service running, ready for review, ready to test out, ready to verify that it's all working correctly. And to completely tie over the loop, so first of all, if we go back to Port and we take a look at the catalog, so like I mentioned, we can already see here the repository with all of its information, and for example, things such as scorecards and checking the production readiness and adding additional information that's very customizable and very much in control by the platform engineer with while considering the requirements of his developers. And in addition, we also have the pull request view where we can see our new pull request, we can see who created it, we can see its status, and so on. And obviously, we can take all of this information and create a dashboard from it. And that way we can sort of put all of that in the homepage or put all of that in sort of a service dashboard and give our developers a view of basically everything that they need to see, everything that they need to manage their day. So a developer can 100% log into Port at the start of his day, open up his My Tasks dashboard or My Services dashboard, and see all of the services that he's responsible for, all of the pull requests that he's assigned as a reviewer or he is waiting for a review on, and all of the requests that he may be made to his DevOps and tickets he needs to take care of. So all of these things can be coupled inside the portal. And then when he needs some additional functionality, he has the self-service hub to get additional resources and sort of additional flows that then integrate with Humanitec and sort of tie all of that in and really make it in a complete experience. Now, to completely close the loop, we can take a look at this new pull request, and let's assume that now I'm reviewing this and this looks perfectly fine to me, just adding a new resource, not a major change, and definitely something that this service requires. So I'm gonna go ahead and merge this pull request. And again, this is going to follow the same process. It's going to trigger a new GitHub workflow for us, and it's going to deploy this new version of the service to the development environment in Humanitec. And oh, I can see that we got a small error. But yeah, the demos are like that sometimes. It happens. But what this is supposed to do is it's supposed to go back to Humanitec and sort of deploy this new version with this new resource. And then now our developer not only had his pull request that's working, and now when things are merged in, he sees everything and his new development environment is deployed with the latest code, with the latest cloud resources, whether that's an S3 bucket or a Redis DB or Postgres or some blob, whatever it is, it's deployed and it's running, and that becomes the new standard for the service, which we can then start building on top of again and again. And with that, the demo concludes. Let me see if there are any specific questions. So I just want to refer to the question that Raj asked earlier about changing Terraform files in GitHub and provisioning infra as part of the IDP. So I believe this action of adding an S3 bucket really showed it as an example, because basically what we did here is we started an action from the developer portal, and that triggered a workflow that actually went ahead and updated a file, which in this case it was the score YAML file, but obviously it can be a Terraform file, it can be a Pulumi code file, it can be a variables file, basically any spec file that you have, and it can already tie into additional workflows that you have that sort of automatically deploy this service or automatically use the resource or make the updates. So 100%, it's something that can be done, and we've also shown it here. I don't see that we have any specific additional questions. Kaspar, do you have any questions about what we've shown?
Yeah, there's actually one question here from Jeremy. Can you create new self-service actions in Port using existing services as a template?
Yes, yes. That is, first of all, it's a great question. And it's exactly what we did here. Because if we take a look at this repository, basically, this is the base repository that I'm taking the deployment from. So when we go ahead and click on Scaffold New Service, what's happening in the background is we take this repository and we basically clone it and then create a new repository from it. And obviously, you can make any changes. You can have some placeholders. For example, for me, I have here this service name placeholder, which I then switch out with the parameter that we've got from the action. But you can add as many or as little parameters and make the changes. You can even just take it as it is, or you can use a popular scaffolding framework, such as a cookie cutter, for example, and just take that as the template, create a new repository from it, and you have a new basic service to just start running from. And obviously, it will tie in with Humanitec, it will tie in with Port and its catalog, and you're good to go.
Nice, cool. If you have other questions, just drop them. I would probably take a second and explain, what actually happened under the hood when we trigger this. And maybe I can quickly share my screen, because I think it might even make sense if I show another context here again. Exactly, here we go. So essentially what happened is that we are using this abstraction layer, or like an abstraction logic. So when More essentially said, we're adding this S3 bucket, he added like the scaffolder added like that line in GitHub to a score file, which is the abstract, essentially the abstract description of the workload and its dependent resources. Score is now a CNCF project, and it says, hey, it describes, my workload in relation to an abstract description of the world. So we are seeing like here, this Postgres, for instance, we don't say whether it's an in-cluster resource or RDS or whatever. We're just describing this in abstract terms. This allows us to keep an environment agnostic record and now be able to dynamically orchestrate everything and make sure then to supply Port always with the latest updated information. I mean, I'm sure you might have wondered, like, why would I use two UIs? The answer is no, you would not use two UIs. You would use Port, right? Which is really like a product optimized for the developer experience. That's sort of a real portal. What More showed from the Humanitec side, that's sort of a view into the orchestration and more geared towards platform engineers. And we are now able to keep the portal always up to date with that graph-based view and dynamically regenerate everything. And why is it important to dynamically regenerate everything? It's not important if you scaffold the service for the first time, because at this point you don't have any dependencies. But if you want to add the S3 bucket, right, then you already have a service, it already has dependencies, and you need to fold that in. You need to regenerate the app configurations, you need to regenerate the infrastructure configurations, and that requires sophisticated orchestration. It's also relevant if you want to keep all of these things maintained. If you want to update all the S3 across your estate, that's where you need orchestration. Makes the overhead for the operation team significantly lower. So we're scaffolding the score file, we're adding changes to the score file, and then we need to have some sort of format to explain the platform how it's supposed to generate the S3 bucket that More provided as an example. And for that, we have so-called resource definitions. Resource definitions say, and here we have an example for Redis, resource definitions say, hey, if the developer requests a Redis, and the criteria is we're deploying to staging or whatever the criteria might be, then please use this parameterized Terraform file or cloud formations or crossplane or whatever you want. And if we then bring this together, what happens is here, Port is actually sending the request and saying, hey, this is the updated score file. This makes its way through the orchestration. The orchestrator analyzes the context by looking at the metadata. It's then choosing the right resource definitions, and it's generating an acyclic resource graph. It's generating the app configs. It's generating the infrastructure configurations, one resource graph for every environment and every deployment. You saw the actual resource graph in the UI view. So if we do a little bit of deep reinforcement learning here, and that's exactly what More did, scaffolding or action in Port triggers, hey, give me a Redis. That would update the score file. The orchestration would catch that change. it would generate the next the right Redis in the right configuration, and it would then generate the next graph. And that also means if we now want to update all the Redis across our estate, you do this in one place, and the orchestration will update this everywhere. And then afterwards do things like run a policy checks, run the sign off, move the ticket, or update all of these things. And that means everything we have now is a graph in the backend, right? And that allows the portal to always be up to date, always display, make sure that the developer has actionable insights, which is so important, really making sure we have that self-service component. We have all the data on the org level, app level, environment level, service level, resource level. And that means also you can ask Port questions, which is also fantastic, right? You can say like, hey, what can Tim, what is like, RBAC is tied to this, right? What's something that user Tim can see? What's something user Tim can change? So maybe the development environment here, but less so in production. You can say, hey, give me all resources of type Redis that we are currently lifecycle managing in an automated fashion. You can look at all of these different things because your world is now not disintegrated repositories across your entire estate, but it is everything in one graph, the power of the graph. Yeah, so that maybe just as a little bit of a background to this, to what's happening under the hood here. Are there any more questions? I think Shane, we had one. Is this product intended for business stakeholders or developers? Mo, what do you think?
So I would say it's a little bit of both. So obviously, the primary focus is developers and developer experience and developer efficiency, and giving them the tools with the combination with the developer portal UI and with Humanitec as the orchestrator to move fast and get their development going and make sure that they're deploying features with high velocity and high confidence. But it's not limited to just that. With all of these live updates that's happening and all of this interaction between Port and Humanitec, and bring all of that information into the portal and creating the right views and dashboards, stakeholders can 100% leverage that and use that to understand how is their dev organization acting? Is it efficient? Where can it be improved? What are sort of the areas of focus or things that might be missed and we need to sort of have initiatives on, or add some more tasks or put some more focus on? So that's 100% a way that stakeholders can also take advantage of the portal and all of the information that's coming from both of these tools together.
And maybe what I found so cool, and I don't really, I just want to make sure that I get this correct. So maybe sort of an adding on to that question, you have this way of customizing different views, right? So you're really able to say like, hey, this is a view more geared towards executives, maybe. This is a one that's really for the day-to-day of the developer. Can you go into like, I think that's one of the superpowers of Port, that customizability. Can you get a little more into detail on this one?
Yeah, for sure. So actually, let me open up our demo because I think that will really drive the point home.
Great.
So yeah, 100%, you totally have the option to create those customized views. So I'm gonna zoom in just a bit. So if we go here, this is sort of the homepage, this is what everybody sees. So you see, this is much more of a management-oriented views. It shows you a lot of metrics, deployment frequency, MTTR, lead time for changes, the deployment frequency over time, how many pages. So this is something much more geared towards an engineering manager. But if I go into the catalog, I can see different views for different stakeholders. Now, obviously, since this is a demo, this sort of shows everything at once, but in an actual organization, you will have an additional RBAC layer that sort of selects what views each person or developer or stakeholder can see. So as a developer, I have here my different views. So plan my day, I can see all of the PRs and all of the tasks and so on. But if I take a look, for example, from the point of a SVP of engineering, so I can take a look at a dashboard that's fully focused on DORA metrics and how can I improve the efficiency of the development org, or taking a look at our uptime. And so this is how you tailor those different views, not only to specific stakeholders, but also to specific people. So all of these views, so for example, this plan my day view, it's tied to my specific user. This is dynamic, and when Kaspar will log in, he will see different tasks, he will see different pull requests. So it's very tailored. You don't have to search too much for what's your next task, what's the next thing that you need to work on. It all works seamlessly, and it makes a very clean experience, very clear. And when you combine that with things such as the self-service hub, which gives you a lot of great capabilities and sort of gives you a lot of independence, both as a developer, but also as an engineering manager that wants to generate some sort of report. It gives you a lot of tools in your belt. And then when you combine it with a tool such as Humanitec, it sort of ties it all together and makes sure that everything is reproducible, and broad changes are very easy with the orchestration and with the score spec. And that's just incredible for efficiency.
Yeah, it's really like a power couple. It was really one of the most impressive terms I've seen in of that combination. We have one question here from Jeremy. When the pull request was created to add an S3 bucket, how did it get automatically deployed so you could preview the changes? Was that a Humanitec feature I might have missed how that happened? I think there were two things at play here. The S3 bucket was actually added by amending the score file. That happened through the self-service option here. Exactly. Mo, you're currently showing that exactly. So we're adding like give me storage of type S3. This then was actually we made a new branch. That information, we need a new branch and we need S3, made its way to the orchestration. The orchestration then says okay, we need a PR environment. Spins up a one-on-one clone of development with all the infrastructure that you require, DNS and stuff. Makes sure that you now have S3, spins up that entire PR environment, allows you to test this. We can see this here, gives you all the diff between the previous one and this one. And then once we say, hey, we're done. So yeah, I think you already did that more. You actually merge that back into the main branch. Then the orchestration will again receive a ping and say, okay, PR1 can now sunset. We'll put PR1 to sleep, the PR environment, and will then automatically update development. And now the development environment will have the S3 bucket that you requested. So that's actually what happened in the background. So that's essentially sort of the job of the orchestration. You can really think of the orchestration like a backend logic. Yeah, backend logic doing stuff for you. We have a question here. What about the setup of infrastructure used by multiple services? Yeah, how is that instrumented? That's also a great question, right? All of the everything we showed here, like, and I think that's also one of the things, I don't know how you think about this more, that I think is so powerful about this combination of tools. It doesn't assume anything. Like nobody here, like we do not want to octroyate what we think the world should look like, right? Some of you will use namespaces, and share clusters, and some of you will have, I mean, I've seen one cluster for every environment for security reasons. And sometimes people look at this from the outside and go like, why would you do this? But there are always a reason, right? You're an organization with your own cultural context. All of these systems you saw today are 100% configurable. You can structure that wherever you want. And in that particular case, you would have a resource definition that says, hey, for this context, this range of applications, this part of the graph, those environments, we want to use one EKS cluster for shared namespaces. This is for dev and staging, for instance, but then for production, we have our own cluster, however you want to do the same for accounts, right? So, the scale of organizations, and I would be interested to actually understand that from you more, like what sort of the client range you're looking at, because every time we work with customers that are using Port and Humanitec in combination, those are very large cases, like we're talking hundreds of developers. And in those cases, you'll have like dozens or hundreds of cloud accounts. You'll have a large amount of clusters, large amount of fleet that you have to manage. So you need to be able to orchestrate everything in any combination. Like, is that the typical Port customer, would you say, Mo?
Yeah, so 100%. We see a lot of customers with very big environments. A big reason that they come to us is they understand their tech sprawl. They understand the fact that they have a lot of mess. They don't have full control over every resource they have. They don't have the visibility, and sort of they want to start gaining control into that and sort of driving efficiency from that control, from those tailored views, from that integration with an orchestrator that really makes their lives easier in managing the backend. And so then they start going into this journey of mapping the different resources, the repositories, the cloud accounts, the resources in the accounts, and then leveraging the self-service to actually interact back with the backend and make the changes. And they sort of get the best of both worlds. They fully understand what they have, but they can also fully interact with it in a self-service manner that's very comfortable, that's very effective for them, and that makes perfect sense for them. And it's very customizable in sort of the building block way that it fits every different use case. So you have one huge EKS where you deploy everything on, that's totally fine. You have a different EKS for every small environment, every developer gets his own EKS, that will also work. You want to make a global change in the configuration of all of those, the orchestrator can do that for you. So it all just ties in very nicely. And again, we're trying to be unopinionated. We're trying to give you the correct tools to do what you need. And I think that's why it resonates very well with a lot of those big organizations, because each of them has a very distinct setup that's very specific to their DNA. And we try to enhance that and not sort of force them into a specific pattern.
Yeah, I think it's so important, right, to be respectful of the situation on the ground. And honestly, something that in the early days of Humanitec we got completely wrong. Like we had a very sort of opinionated, this is how you should do things, and don't deviate from our standard. But I've also come to the conclusion the last year, like, there is a reason why people do the things they do, and our job is to fold into that and support them. And I think this setup is doing an incredible job at this. So we have one question from Jeremy here, who first of all feels like he's happy about the demo. So that's great, Jeremy. There is a free version of Port. There is a free version, correct?
Yeah.
Exactly. So on the website, there is a free version of the orchestrator on humanitec.com. So he says it would be great to see a webinar in a workshop format where we could follow along and building this out with you. I think that would actually be fantastic. I'm sure lots of people would be interested in that. But for those that want to do that for themselves, like they have a little bit of time tomorrow, and they can choose between a date with their partner or setting up Port and Humanitec. How would they go about doing this?
So the actual setup for this was incredibly simple. On the Humanitec side, you just follow the basic quick start guide to have an EKS cluster. And obviously, it doesn't have to be EKS. It could be on whichever cloud that you choose. So you get that cluster up and running. And on the Port side, everything with this was install the GitHub integration and set up 2 self-service actions. And like I've shown, we have that base repository that we're cloning from, and it already has all of the information for you. It has the workflows, it has the score YAML file, it has the application code. So it's all there. You just use the actions to scaffold that away. And then with the connection to the EKS or any cluster in the Humanitec platform, it just ties the whole loop. And basically, you don't really have to do much. I think it will be a great idea and something I will work on to create sort of an open repository of all of the resources, the different JSON configurations and the guides, and sort of a step by step. And then we can share that. And I believe people will find that very helpful. Basically, in probably under 30 minutes, you can have this demo up and running in your environment.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's not like, I mean, I think you built a great integration, right? You have that in your documentation. I'm sure we can send that afterwards as well, with the follow-ups. And that's something that looks like magic, but is something we are rolling. I mean, I'm also doing like a lot of customer stuff. Like I'm in Australia alone. I'm rolling this thing out with Amazon based and with Google based simultaneously. So that's a real thing in real use at real scale, and pretty well rounded at this point. Fantastic. I don't think that there are any more questions, which is great. We're exactly on time. Mo, is there anything that bugged you and you really still wanted to talk about while we're together tonight?
No, I think we pretty much covered all of it, and I'm very happy with the result of the demo. I hope everyone watching also liked it. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for spending so much time on this and preparing this. And this was super, super helpful. And let's see, maybe in the future we can also think about at one of the larger events, a reInvent or something like this, giving like a joint workshop for folks that want to build this themselves and replicate the experience that we had here tonight. Well, thank you so much for all the insights, all the effort on this, and hope to see you soon.
Yeah. Thank you so much.